Perspectives, Finding Common Ground, a podcast series that brings together a panel of thought leader perspectives as a forum to socialize and problem solve education technology issues with the goal to ultimately find common ground.
Hi, my name is Patrick Devaney, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this episode of Perspectives, Finding Common Ground. Today is a special episode. We're going to be talking about the ClassLink Back to School Summit. By way of background, for those of you that are unfamiliar, over the last 2 years, ClassLink has brought together school leaders, vendors, and ed tech experts to discuss the challenges of the back to school season, with an effort to focus on collaborating to find new ways to improve the experience for all stakeholders. During the summit, many issues were discussed and ideas were shared. In the end, school leaders and vendors agreed on 5 key challenges, and the intention is to create ongoing collaboration and find solutions to these challenges. In this episode, we will be highlighting the challenges from the work group's stakeholders, representing the company and school perspectives. We're going to begin our exploration with the challenge of implementing a new technology project which rolls out during the back-to-school season. The leadership work group for this challenge was led by Jean Silverman. She's a retired executive director for the Nassau BOCES. She was supported by Jason Collette, who was a pre-sales solution manager from Savas, as well as Shelley Rizito, who is a retired technology director for the Monticello School District and also a ClassLink senior advisor.
Thanks, Patrick, and welcome everyone. In May of 2022, ClassLink hosted a back to school forum conference, a virtual conference. And we broke into several leadership work groups. And the group that I worked with was a group of people from schools and companies that just took the time to discuss the challenge of implementing a technology project. And the back to school issue is that oftentimes is feeling very rushed. And we spent a lot of time in this group. We had 2 terrific moderators, Maurice Dragon from Orange County Schools in Florida and Andy Shore from Canva. And we spent a couple of hours really drilling into the issues that we face in schools of implementing technology projects, some of them with a rapid deployment, which makes it even more challenging, for example, when we closed schools during the pandemic. And so we spent time looking at the problem, and the people from across the country identified root causes, expectations, frustrations, communication problems, leadership problems. What happens when things go wrong? Who knows what, and where is the leadership? There was a tremendous amount of frustration and we won't be ready to open school because sometimes these things just don't go as well as we need them to. That is, I might say, with the best work from our leaders in our school districts and of course, the company or vendor that we're working with for our technology. And so that group came up, we ended up with, I'm gonna tell you about the 4 essential questions that we left this meeting with. The first issue was this is not always a back to school issue. Sometimes, but they do, tech projects do need to be completed in time to open school or for a rapid deployment. But then what happens when they don't go well? What happens when systems and protocols, the if-thens don't work as well as we need them to? It often leads to frustration and actually teachers and schools and people not having what they need. The second idea they came up with was, well, we work with a lot of vendors and companies to do this work, and they seem to have practices and structures in place for their sales, their implementations, and their customer solutions. They have software they use and teams and people are organized. And well, why can't we do something like that? Because they seem to really know how to get a technology project implemented. The third point was our school leaders, managers, programs, and services often seem so separate from one another. They seem so siloed. And even if the tech director and a good team is in charge of the project, sometimes things just get disrupted. Communication isn't strong. One department or another or school is just too far from the conversation. So how can we fix that problem? And the third one was many of the deployments are extremely technical. They're complex. They may be something that's emerging. They may be something that many people in the district are not even that familiar with. So how can we have a better deployment by engaging and bringing in more people into the technology project implementation, so everybody understands why we're doing what we're doing, and maybe even why we're doing it quickly. So as you can see, this group did a lot of great work. We came up with a lot of interesting ideas and posed to our community of educators, how can we do this and have a total quality, perfect, or at least very well done technology deployment. And by the way, it may need to be very rapid. So that's my piece. I'd like to turn it over now to Jason from Savas to talk a little bit about, as the business representative, what his perspective is on this topic.
Thanks, Jean. When we work with districts all over the country, one of the things that we have found is very important to do is to come to a memorandum of understanding, if you will, so both sides understand the responsibilities of the technical project. And often the interest in a solution comes from one person having a conversation with one person, but we all realize to do anything like this, it's going to require multiple people across both the vendor side and the school and or district side to get this project done. And we need to come to that understanding as early as possible through these are the responsibilities of the vendor who is going to deliver that. And from the district and school side, we need the commitments from these people. None of us have the full transparency into everybody's calendar to make the critical decisions without the representation of those people. So if you're a curriculum director, you don't know what the technology group may be putting through. Maybe there's a new student information system rolling out this summer and you don't understand how long that's going to take. Or conversely, the tech department hasn't reached out to the curriculum. They may not even be aware of that adoption and what the training schedule is like. So it's very important to move these discussions early. And the beauty of tech is you can have these conversations all year long. Nobody's out there saying you have to wait until June or July to start these things. You can talk about this all year long. But, we do things like reverse timelining. So if there's a critical date for May 1st for doing training, then we need to work backwards from May 1st so everybody understands. And we use that reverse timeline as a checkpoint throughout the process to say, okay, here's where we're at. If this slides, then everything else slides from there. And then, from our perspective, one of the other things we like to do is to put together that district map. Who are we working with and who has those responsibilities and who is our key contact? And we want to supply the same thing to districts. That way, it's just a smooth process, as smooth as it can be throughout the entire implementation. That way it's not so backloaded, because often, and I think we've all been in an experience where something just gets dropped on our desk, like, hey, put this together, we need it next week. It's not a great experience. It doesn't have to be that way. With technology, again, it's a great thing. We can do it all year long. Even if it's just a 15 minute conversation, is still incremental progress. And the key word there is progress. You're still doing something. That way you're not rushing all the way at the end.
I really believe that an infrastructure needs to be put into place for the person that's actually managing the project. That typically doesn't happen. Many of us were classroom teachers and ended up in the tech director role. And I'd like us to think about the preparation, the education, the support, and the skills required to be able to manage small and large projects that impact thousands of users. My first project that I implemented in my school district 30 years ago was putting in a new phone system. And I remember sitting around the table with contractors and the superintendent and the architecture company and engineers, absolutely not really sure where I fit in, because I really didn't have much project management experience. So I'd like to contribute the fact that oftentimes tech directors don't get the skill development that they might need to really manage a project effectively. There are different communication strategies that are necessary. When you sit in a room with contractors, they have maybe 5 minutes and they really don't want to discuss anything. They really want to get down to the job, and they're looking at you as a leader, and you really better be prepared to understand what you're going to do. Then there's the education community that is a little bit more discussion oriented. So project management skills and building a project is something that most of us don't come to the table with. So I'm going to say that that was probably one of my biggest challenges. And I looked to private industry, actually my husband and the engineer from the architecture company, to give me a very quick understanding of what it means to manage a project, how you use Microsoft Project, and how you build something that can sustain you through the project, provide feedback to people, and also help you with any issues that might come along the way. So I really think it's more that we really weren't prepared. It's not something that you learn, but it is something that is necessary.
Thank you for that overview. Clearly, there are many aspects to implementing a new technology project, especially at this very busy time of the year. Another back-to-school challenge that also requires year-round work is the training and proper preparation for end users. Implementation of EdTech tools frequently happen during the summer. Often teachers aren't available for training outside the few busy in-service days just before students come back. Alternative timeframes and various access for multiple formats of PD are required to prepare teachers in time for the start of school. Some of the constraints and possible solutions will be shared by our next three guests as they share their perspectives, starting with Dr. Heidi Rogers, the facilitator of this work group.
Hi, I'm Heidi Rogers, the CEO of the Northwest Council for Computers in Education, and I represent a professional learning group that's a nonprofit organization. And today we're going to talk about the problems and the challenges with training and having our staff ready when we come back in this fall. First off, the biggest challenge that we're facing when we meet with districts is lack of substitute teachers. There are no substitute teachers across this nation right now. Therefore, teachers, principals, aides, all the people that need to have professional development with these new tools that we're exploring and integrating, there are not enough subs to provide training and to have teachers go to conferences and things like that, or spend a half a day out of the classroom. We need more substitute teachers. So that's the biggest challenge I'm seeing. Now I'd like to introduce Barbara. Barbara has an extensive experience in schools. She's been on the ground most of her entire career, such titles as assistant superintendent for technology for schools. And so, Barbara, why don't you share the biggest challenge that you see in schools?
Thank you, Heidi. Appreciate the introduction. I've spent 35 years in working in school districts, both as a teacher, classroom teacher, an instructional coach, administrator at a school, and then over 20 years as a district office administrator, where a large part of my job was making sure that our teachers and other staff were ready all the time for new initiatives, for instruction, for administrative technology, all of the different things that they needed to do to perform their job. And I agree, subs are like a huge issue with teacher training, but I honestly think that this is an issue that's just such an ongoing rolling issue. Every year you have teachers who we have to onboard, brand new teachers, year one teachers out of college. You have teachers who are new to your system, but not new to being teachers. So they just need to know your curriculum, your technology tools. You have teachers who may have been in your system a long time, but who've switched grade levels or content area. You may be rolling on new apps. So you have new apps you need to train for, and not just for teachers. This could be administrators. You may have a new assistant principals who have to learn their role in the discipline module of your student information system, or how to access security cameras. You have bus drivers who need training. You have clerical staff, you have instructional assistants who need training. So this issue of making sure that our staff and our teachers and our administrators are ready for a new school year really is a challenge that we should be thinking about how to solve all year round. So I'd like to introduce a dear friend and colleague, Serena Sachs-Mendel, who right now is the Global Education CTO for Microsoft. And we've worked together and known each other for a number of years. And I know that Serena has a unique perspective on this role from her experience, both as a district level leader in schools in Atlanta and in Florida, but also in her work for various nonprofit and for-profit industries right now, particularly Microsoft. So Serena, can you share what you see as the challenges in this area?
Of course. Thanks, Barbara, and thanks, Heidi. And as Barbara said, I've both been a technology leader in districts in Florida and Georgia, and now in Microsoft, I'm on the other side supplying the technology. And in both cases, I see that the ongoing evolution of technologies is challenging for our educators. And there are some people that naturally grasp all the new changes, and they're always curious and looking for what's new and how they can use it. And there are other people that haven't been as eager to do that. So I think it's a combination of leveraging what other teachers know and how they leverage it in their instructional practices, and keeping up. Having everybody should take on some of that challenge of keeping up with what's new. So at Microsoft, we're constantly evolving the technology based on what our educators ask for. And when we deliver that functionality, we want you to use it. And so there's easy ways of keeping up with it. So for example, Mike Tholson does TikTok, he does LinkedIn, he does YouTube, and you just subscribe to his channel and just, watch. And he gives you these very snackable, bite-sized chunks of this is what's new this month. And it's a good way of taking advantage of it, because the new technologies are made for this moment. We know, we listen, we hear what's going on, and we try to keep evolving the technology based on those requirements. And so the number one thing that I hear from educators in the US and across the globe is they don't know what they have. They don't know how powerful the tools are that they already own. And so some of that's on the IT departments and the training departments to put that knowledge out there for the teachers. But how can we help teachers use those tools that are out there so they can use just-in-time training, snackable, on their own pace, at their own place? And just like we're asking our students to take on agency over their learning, we need our teachers to do that too. And so how do we do that? I realize teachers are already overburdened, already overwhelmed. There's just so much stress in the system. And what we're trying to do with technology is actually take away some of that stress, make it somewhat easier, but you have to invest in order to get that dividend.
And Serena, I appreciate what you said, and it made me think of a challenge, and that's time. And we never seem to have enough time. And so time to train teachers, but time to plan. And I know that one of the things that we saw that was the most successful and impactful when I was at the district level was when technology and instruction would work together to plan professional development for all audiences that modeled the pedagogy and the tools that we had, so that we were modeling for our teachers what we would want them to see in the classroom. But that again takes a great deal of time. So, Heidi, back to what you said as a challenge, I think one of the things that we're really looking for with this particular challenge are people who found some unique ways to solve for this challenge, come on board and kind of give us and share some of those ideas with us. Because I think that some of these problems have been solved for really well by many school districts and vendors and other organizations like Heidi, the one that you work for around the country. And I think together we can collaboratively come up with some ideas that would be very helpful to all of the education community at large.
And Barbara, Serena, one of the things I also wrote down besides time, what I heard from you guys was new roles. And now more than ever, teachers are having to take on different roles, different classrooms. They might have, if they have a special ed certification, we need so many special ed certifications. I've seen people have to change roles. So many new roles are happening. And the other thing in the word new is what Serena said, is all the new functions that programs can do and apps to help students. And again, I think the most important thing is what we try to do when we work with a district is we first go and say, what is the district's goals? What are the principal's goals? What are the teacher goals? What are the learning goals? And then what Barbara said is tie it back to teaching and learning of what's important. We all know it's just not a tool. Technology can truly, truly help guide instruction. And that's what I think all of us want here today, to help guide instruction.
I would love to hear what hacks our educators have to absorb the new technology and learn the new features and functions. And maybe they're having kind of group, informal lunch and learns. Maybe they're doing it, before they go to sleep at night. I don't know, but I would love to learn how our teachers are taking on this challenge of learning the new features and functions in technology and then incorporating it into their instructional practice for the benefit of students. And Barbara, I love what you said about we need our teacher education, our teacher training to model what we want our teachers to do in the classrooms. I think that's super powerful. One of the things we did at Fulton is we had Vanguard teachers, and they were like kind of super techie teachers, and they helped all the other teachers incorporate the technology into their instruction so that students really benefited from it.
The one thing I would just add is what Barbara said. You have to have the administrators on board, not just on board to provide professional, they have to be in the class, they have to be in the training as well.
Yes.
They have to model for the teachers.
Thank you, team, for highlighting not only significant challenges, but also suggesting best practices to address the need for professional development. Next, we're going to address the challenge of software governance. It's a broad category with diverse considerations by many stakeholders: curriculum approval, technology approval, as well as finance approval. Central to all of these considerations and highlighted in this conversation is equity.
Hi, I'm Rich Cantartesi. I'm a former CIO, CTO, Assistant Superintendent, Director of Instructional Technology for over 35 years. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about software governance with Angela Green, who is from Klein ISD in Texas. She's the coordinator of resource materials, and Joanne Najarian. She's a former director of technology in Massachusetts and now a senior engagement director for ClassLink. So the portion that we would like to talk to today is really, what is the equity, inclusion, and availability of software and hardware for students? How's the hardware and software distributed? And do students have the same access to software titles and hardware? These are the things that we need to know. How do we know it? How can we prove it? How can we be objective? Parents in the community want to know. And also students, are they getting their fair share of the instructional programs and the same access to instruction? We know utilization and distribution are the main factors for technology in schools. So how can we make a determination about objectivity in reporting software usage, and also how this may be able to help us through analytics, where we would be able to increase objectivity and reduce the subjectivity, so that when we are providing information, parents will get a very accurate picture, school by school within the district, class by class within the school. So when we look at software governance, we want to make sure that every student is in a collaborative environment in the classroom, able to access all of the materials and have equity across the entire district. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Angela Green.
Thanks, Rich. And yes, equity and the inclusion is very important for us in school districts. Unfortunately, we face a lot of challenges when trying to figure out what we have in the district, what's available for our students, and even some of that accountability piece. And a lot of that has to do with the various departments that are involved and all the moving parts, because from beginning to end of purchasing the resource, identifying resources, all the way to setting them up and handling all those pieces of policy, procedures, data, and the data governance and security, that involves a lot of people. And so school districts sometimes are a little challenged with having the personnel that can actually do each of those areas really well. Sometimes people who are managing the resources were a former teacher who used it a lot in the classroom, and now they've been voluntold to to kind of help out with that resource.
Love the
And
service.
so in order for school districts to kind of have some guidance and some ability to have some information for like, okay, this is your position now, this is kind of what you're helping with. Here's kind of, I don't know, toolkit or some way to say, here's some information to get you started and for them to have some guidance. Because it is very important for us to make sure that we have the resources needed and we are meeting the needs of all of our kids, and no matter what that looks like, and ensuring that our kids are able to get the education that they need.
That's great. Thank you so much, Angela. Joanne, I'd like to turn it over to you.
As a former tech director, I completely agree with all that Angela talked about. There's so many different pieces that come into play in a district as you're starting a school year or just throughout the school year. But from the vendor perspective, software governance is really important, and it can be a big struggle around back to school with it, ensuring that your districts are set up properly as a single sign-on provider. With ClassLink, we are working with different vendors, sharing data, making sure that the schools are getting the proper data to the vendors, first coming in from their SIS, as well as going out to those vendors in a timely manner, and making sure that they're staying within their business regulations. So what are those privacy policies that they may have to deal with in district or have in play that they need us to comply with? So there's many different features inside ClassLink or with any vendor as they're dealing with student data, complying with that privacy, or really actually trying to pull in extra information so that they can get really rich analytics on specific demographic areas, grade levels, subset groups, and also ensuring that all of their users are being pulled in a timely manner. And with back to school being a very long amount of time, starting early for the South and ending pretty late for the Northeast, it can be a struggle with capacity for a lot of vendors to be able to handle getting that data properly.
So we're really glad we had some very deep discussions about the equity and availability and inclusion of students using software. There are programs out there, for example, ClassLink Analytics, that give you the beginning view, if you will, of the data that you have in your system. Ability to find out the utilization of specific software titles. And combined with other software, it can be used to correlate, for example, the utilization of software titles, and then also student performance or district performance. And that's all driven by analytics. So I think in closing, in our review, we have found that for a school to be very, very successful and a community to be successful, it is imperative that there is equity, inclusion, and availability of software and hardware for all students. Thanks.
Thank you, Rich and team. There are certainly many factors to consider. Next, we're going to talk about app rollover. And rolling applications over from one year to the next might seem as simple as assigning students and teachers to new classes. And although logical sequences may be planned to access new and existing apps for the start of the school year, this scenario is not always reality. We will hear perspectives pertaining to this challenge, starting with the chairperson, Shelley Rizito.
This session, we'll be talking about rolling over apps for the new school year. And we found it to be a very interesting subject because we realized that there are two pieces to it. One is a lot of the success of a great app rollover can be due to the policies and procedures that you create during the year. So everybody in the district really understands what their role is in terms of app acquisition, and that helps with being able to populate the apps and roll them over. The second piece that we found was that many of the school districts are doing the same thing as the neighboring school districts, and there might be some common tools that we can think about that can be developed. As part of the panel, I'd like to introduce Sherry, and Sherry will introduce herself and Brandon. Sherry, you want to take it away?
Yes, I'm Shari Stratton. I am the Director of Instructional Technology for Putnam City Schools. It's a large school district in the Oklahoma City area. One of the big struggles we have at the end of the year, because the end of the year is such a busy time, is the multiple times I'm giving the same information to different vendors. I'm repeating myself over and over again. So I'm looking for a way that we can streamline that a little bit. And so the vendors can get the information that they need without me sending the same type of information, 40, 50 some odd times.
Thank you, Sherry. And Brandon?
My name is Brandon Usher, currently a DBA2 or Database Analyst 2 with Aerie Software, who is an SIS provider, where my role is essentially to assist and perform rollovers for the districts that we host in our systems. And then also trying to perform that coordination piece for the districts, if possible, for their integrations and whatnot. Every district's different, just like Sherry said, where timing is everything. The same information is getting sent out multiple times. And the hardest part is making sure essentially the schedules are completed for most districts before their vendors start receiving their data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we came up with a lot of questions that were similar between the districts. For when are the rollover dates for the vendors? Are some of the school districts participating in summer school? How does that impact app rollover? And it would be great to think about creating a common list of questions and then coming up with some solutions. Could be some type of a form that everybody fills out so that we get everybody's perspective in there.
Thanks, team, for that overview. Next, and finally, we're going to talk about the work group focusing on the challenge around summer school and scheduling this during the back-to-school calendar constraints. I'm going to start with the chairperson of this work group to give a little more detail on the challenge, and we'll hear the customer and vendor perspectives. Take it away, June.
Research has shown that summer learning is a critical component to help students accelerate their learning. It is also excellent for their well-being. And the federal government has given an unprecedented amount of money to local school districts and state educational agencies to help with accelerating learning for students during the summer. And with this money and with research, we know that school districts and state educational agencies have to change their data systems to include summer scheduling. That is a challenge, and that is one of the challenges of a work group sponsored by the Council for Chief State School Officers and the National Summer Learning Association. This collaborative is dedicated to helping state educational agencies accelerate learning and provide quality learning experiences during the summer. Kathleen Earhart, who is with the Council of Chief State School Officers, has been heading this effort on behalf of the Council of Chief State School Officers. And the partnership with the National Summer Learning Association has been very critical in helping states think about data systems, including summer scheduling. We know that one of the problems with scheduling is that the summer typically has been the time when state educational agencies and school districts shut down their data systems in order to be ready for the coming year. And so with this collaborative of 8 or 9 states, the Council of Chief State School Officers and the National Summer Learning Association are working to help states overcome this challenge. Kathleen, your work has been critical in this endeavor. So could you tell us a little bit more about why this is a challenge and why summer learning is so important to the National Summer Learning Association and to the Council for Chief State School Officers.
Sure. Thanks, June. We started this partnership now 2 years ago. It actually initiated prior to COVID and school shutdowns, and then it became critical, both with the need for getting kids back together after that first period of monthly shutdowns, and then even more critical when, as June mentioned, funds released to departments of education, flow-through funds and operational funds to support summer and out-of-school learning. The partnership, funded by the Wallace Foundation and with the National Summer Learning Association, is bringing together 9 states to think critically about how summer learning can support the needs of students, both academically and social emotionally. One of the challenges that I've seen from the beginning is this is not typically state work, other than 21st Century, which is a flow-through federal government program that supports out-of-school learning. States have not really engaged in the work of summer learning, and typically, additionally, it's not been connected to the typical school year. Summer learning was always operated as apart and separate. Oftentimes we see summer learning prior to this work that we've been doing with states thought of as more of a daycare system for younger students or a credit recovery system for older students. And now we're pushing states to partner with external organizations who provide summer learning regularly in their own communities to link the work of what happens during the school year to the work of what can happen in the summer. It should be a continuum rather than stop education at the end of the school year, start summer learning, and then start school year again without the two being connected. So that's been a great change. June mentioned the challenge with collecting data. That has been another challenge. Is districts or states are not used to collecting data on summer learning, much more than attendance data. This is who came, this is how many times they came, this is how many hours they had of summer learning, but not necessarily linking it to student outcomes and student well-being.
And so the challenge for many states and local school districts is, number one, to work collaboratively with partners who provide summer learning to develop quality data systems, including scheduling. Another is the security of the systems. And another is to make sure that you can have just-in-time delivery for scheduling and other components needed in a data system.
And another challenge, from my own experience in working in the State Department, is data isn't necessarily connected. It's collected by all of these various groups within the state agency, but the data doesn't talk to each other. So I know states are in process of linking data systems, upgrading data systems so that the data becomes more connected, so that data that's connected and collected around 21st Century or other summer learning initiatives is then linked to accountability data that states are collecting as a part of a federal requirement.
I'd like to thank all of our guests for their contributions to this rich conversation. Your voice and experience are important. We also want to take this time to let you all know that we're inviting you to get involved and join these conversations and our effort to improve the collective back-to-school experience for all. These thought leadership work groups all have space for you to get involved and contribute. So if you're interested in joining as a thought leader with one of these work groups, please email us at bts.summit@classlink.com. And everyone, get ready for our next Back-to-School Summit, which is scheduled for April 13th, 2023.
Thank you for listening. ClassLink is proud to be the meeting place to facilitate these conversations. If you have a topic idea, send it to perspectives@classlink.com. To keep hearing our perspectives, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify and subscribe to us on YouTube.